Hello and welcome to Just a Dog podcast. I'm your host Nadine. In this week's episode, I speak with Gemma and Adva, the organisers behind Free Spanish Hounds, a UK-based movement that marches each year to raise awareness of Spain's abandoned hunting dogs. If you've never heard of Galgos or Podencos, you're not alone. Most people in the UK haven't. They're Spanish hunting breeds, sight hounds, used mainly for hare and rabbit coursing. They're fast, they're intelligent, and deeply sensitive. But for many hunters, they're seen as tools rather than as companions. At the end of the hunting season, when they're no longer considered useful, tens of thousands are abandoned or killed. Some are left in fields and some are dumped in wells, and others are handed to shelters if they're lucky. It's hard to comprehend, especially when you think about how dogs are treated here in the UK. Sleeping on sofas, wrapped in blankets, loved and protected by law. And that's what makes this issue so hard to grasp. In 2023, Spain passed its first national animal welfare law, a huge step forward for many animals, but hunting dogs were deliberately excluded from it. Companion animals, like the ones that we live with, are protected, but Galgos and Podencos are not. The same species, but treated as two different kinds of being. The legal gap means cruelty often goes unpunished, and thousands of dogs continue to live and die outside this framework of care that many of us take for granted. It's a reminder that empathy shouldn't have borders, and that awareness has to start from somewhere. In this episode, I speak with Gemma and Adva, two women who are part of the Awareness in Action. Gemma is an HR director and a trustee of Hope for Podencos. She shares her home with 4 rescued hounds, all of whom she calls her purpose. Adva works in marketing and adopted a galgo named Tapas after losing her greyhound. That one decision opened her eyes to the reality facing Spain's hunting dogs and led her into cross-border advocacy work. Together, through Free Spanish Hounds, they're connecting people across countries and cultures to speak for dogs that most of us will never see, but whose lives still matter. This conversation is about how empathy becomes action, how love for one dog can ripple outward and begin to change systems, and what it really means to care, not just for our own animals, but also for those still waiting to be seen. Gemma and Adva, I'm so happy to have you here today. Welcome to Just a Dog podcast. Both of you are from Free Spanish Hounds. Do you work on this project all day, every day? Is this your full-time gig?
No.
Oh, it's not.
It's one of a couple of I wouldn't call them side hustles because they normally make money or make me money. But no, I've got a full-time job. I'm a HR director for a restaurant company. I also am a trustee of Hope for Podencos. So in my spare time, evenings, weekends, I am adopting dogs. And on top of that, I also run Free Spanish Hounds with Adva and some other amazing volunteers.
That's wonderful. And Adva, how about you?
I have a full-time job too. I am a marketeer currently for a SaaS tech product, and Free Spanish Hounds is it's not a side gig; it's a passion, obviously.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's this time of year that we start thinking ahead about next year, and yes, it's starting to get busier. We both start to spend more time thinking and planning our next protest.
I find that most people that I know in the dog world have full-time jobs, myself included, and then do these things on the side, and I agree with you, Adva, it's very much a passion, isn't it? I would like to understand from each of you individually what your first exposure to Spanish greyhounds were. Like, what was the first time that you learned about it and how?
I suppose, first of all, I'd say for me, it's not Spanish greyhounds, it's Spanish Podencos. That's kind of where my experience lies. My husband and I have always loved dogs. I had dogs growing up. We knew we wanted a dog. We don't want children. I think that's really important to say, actually, because I think that's why this is such a passion project. And it is really, my purpose. I feel really lucky that I found my purpose in both the charity work and a kind of an extension of that in Free Spanish Hounds. I researched lots of dog breeds, and there were a few that I fell in love with. We went to discover dogs at Crufts. One of the breeds that I'd fallen in love with was an Ibethan Hound, but I knew I really wanted to rescue. So we went there, we met them, and they just blew me away. Just their kind of temperament, just their curiosity, their calm gentleness. And then when I took that away to look at, well, could I rescue one? That's when I discovered what happens in Spain, which isn't widely publicized. Often you hear about the bullfighting, you hear about other things kind of going on in Europe, but this wasn't something that was kind of, made publicly available. And I just suddenly realized there were thousands of these dogs that really needed help and support. So I adopted my first Podenco. That was back in 2018. And she's my sole dog. She is the reason for it all. She's here in the background with my other 3 Podencos that I've now adopted. So I've got 4 in total. And they captivated me. They are so resilient. They are so adaptable despite everything that they go through. And obviously the Spanish Greyhound, the Galgo, goes through something that's incredibly similar. But yeah, that kind of led me into the charity work, and then really to thinking about how I could represent the charity that I'm a trustee for in, this space, kind of bringing that message to a wider audience. So yeah, that's kind of how it happened, a little bit by accident, but I like to think of it as kind of fate. And yeah, like I said, I just feel really, really lucky to have found my calling and to be kind of living that every day.
That's amazing. Like, how do you even find the time? And also with 4 dogs.
It is a balance sometimes, but they're great. I'm often driving other people's Podencos up and down the country, dropping them to new homes of bits and pieces, and my dogs are really adaptable. They'll flex around it. They'll come with me if needed. They'll miss a walk if needed, for the greater good. So yeah, we fit it all in.
How long have you been working with dogs?
So for the charity, I've been kind of involved for the last 3 years or so, and we actually gained charity status this year. So I am now a trustee. But yeah, I mean, it is a full-time job on top of a full-time job. We do have to squeeze it in at all hours of the day, night, evening, weekends. But like I say, when you enjoy it, when you love it, it doesn't feel like a job. It's a wonderful hobby that's making a difference.
That's so cool. I have to admit, I really don't know much about Podencos other than how bloody cute they are and those ears.
Yep. So Podenco is the Spanish word for hound. It kind of covers a lot of different subbreeds of Podenco. The beauty of Podencos in particular is they come in a variety of different sizes. So where Galgos are predominantly one kind of size, you get a little bit of flux. Podencos you can get from kind of 6-7 kilos. So tiny, tiny little Podencos. Some of them kind of look a bit like sausage dogs. They've got really short legs. They've still got the big ears, right up to kind of 35 plus kilos. So a huge range, really diverse. And that goes for looks as well. Rough coats, smooth coats, different colors, different patterns, and personalities as well. So they are used for hunting in Spain, different types of game, predominantly hares and rabbits, but some of the bigger ones are kind of crossed with other breeds and are used for hunting wild boar, and they face exactly the same challenges as Galgos. A lot of the hunters will have Galgos and Podencos, and they'll kind of hunt with them both. So Podencos in particular are known as the Great Forgotten. That's how they are referenced. Maybe that is because Galgos are slightly more well known, I'm not sure. But yeah, both treated not very nicely in Spain, not subject to animal rights, which we'll come on to, I'm sure. But yeah, just make incredible pets despite their past. Some of mine have been incredibly nervous when they arrived, and they've just blossomed and, really do have that forgiving nature, exactly like Galgos, really. So yeah, very, very similar. Ears are definitely the one kind of standout. You'll know a Podenco when you see one because their ears are huge.
Adva, let's go back to your journey. How did you first hear about Galgos or Podencos?
We had a rescue greyhound, brindle greyhound, an ex-racer. And I still remember walking in one day near where we live in central London, and I was stopped by a young guy who asked me, "Is this a Galgo?" I looked at him and asked him, "A what?" And he said, "A Galgo, a Spanish dog. I grew up with one. My parents rescued one." And he showed me a photo of a dog that he had on his phone. And I was like, okay, no, it's not a Galgo. It's a greyhound. And I kept walking. And that name kept coming up in conversations just with random people. And then obviously the pandemic, social media, and I came across your Galgo and started following him on Instagram. I remember starting, reading and understanding what's going on and thinking this is just horrible. And they also thinking, I want to have a galgo. My next dog, I want to have a galgo. Or perhaps even not so much next dog. I kind of hoped that I could have a galgo while my greyhound, who was very happy, confident dog from day one, I have to say, could be a mentor to a rescue dog, a more nervous rescue dog. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. A greyhound got sick and died very suddenly. Soon after, we adopted a galgo. We have Tapas, and obviously started following rescues and galgos groups on social media again. And this is when, like many other people, I learned about the animal welfare law in Spain. And I know we're going to keep talking about it because it was a pivotal point for us, for the Free Spanish Hounds. And yeah, and the rest is history.
How did you come to know of each other and work together, and what do you work on?
Tapas was adopted through Greyhounds in Need. And the year, 2023, again, when the law was introduced, it became known that Galgos and Podencos, the hunting dogs, have been excluded from the animal welfare law in Spain. There were lots of posts in Instagram about protests against that cruelty. And Greyhounds in Need, I remember, posted on the feed a schedule of protests. It was also Dia de Galgo, the day of the Galgo, February 1st, Galgo marches, as they are known to many Galgo owners. And I remember commenting on Instagram on that post asking, is there one in London? Because I want to join. And the answer was no. But someone reached out and said, let's have a chat. So we started talking, we formed a WhatsApp group, and this is how Gemma, I don't really remember who introduced Gemma, because the person I was introduced to next was Heather. And Heather it was Heather, Gemma, and I, the first Spanish Hounds that organized the march in London in 2023. And then Gemma, I don't know how I can't remember how you were introduced to the group.
I think it was Heather. I think she set up the Free Spanish Hands Instagram, and then she messaged Hope for Podencos. So I run the social account for Hope for Podencos, and I've also got an account for my dogs as well. And I think she might have reached out on both of those, actually. And I'd been thinking for a long while about wanting to do this. There was a march back in 2016, and it was kind of a one-off in London. And I remember, I didn't know what Podencos were at that point in time, so I saw this years after. And I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, I would love to organise that, but I just have no idea where to start. I'd had a chance kind of encounter on Facebook at one point with somebody that had run one of those marches and had given me a little bit of intel, and I just thought, I wouldn't have a clue. So when that message dropped in from Heather, and I knew that there were other people that were thinking about it, I obviously spoke to my teammates at Hope for Podencos and said, I know this is something we'll want to get involved in as a rescue. We weren't a charity at the time. Are you happy that I kind of represent the charity in this way? And they were like, absolutely. We all kind of take slightly different roles, and they take up a lot of the slack on adoptions while I'm really kind of getting into the thick of this. So yeah, it was just one of those chance things, really, and it's been amazing because we've formed a real friendship as a result of this as well. It's the dogs, but so much more, which is really lovely.
So when did you organise the first one, the first march?
Started organising in 2023, but because they happen around the beginning of February, we had to do a lot of our prep work in 2023, and then I can't remember exactly what day it was. It's always around the 1st.
It was the 3rd of February. 3rd of February 2024. Yeah.
So what's the significance? Why specifically 1st, 2nd or 3rd of February?
So that marks the end of the hunting season in Spain, which actually starts around this time. It kind of lasts for around 12 Sundays, I think, of the year. And at the end of the hunting season in particular is where the rescues see a huge influx of dogs that are in some ways the lucky ones. They have either escaped, they have been let go, they have been abandoned, much, much worse. Oftentimes they are in really, really awful states, and that really is the kind of significance. It's just that kind of annual reminder. Not that you need an annual reminder, it's happening all the time. Podencos are found and Galgos every single day, other hunting dogs in Spain, but yeah, that is in particular when rescues really start to struggle. So that's why they chose that weekend to kind of really shine a light on it.
And yeah, just to say that we actually support NAC. So Free Spanish Hounds organizes the protest in the UK, but we support NAC, No a la Caza, which is an animal rights group based in Spain. And they have been organizing protests in Spain for a while. They started expanding overseas. They have very strong influence and presence in Germany, where every year around that weekend, again, 1st of February is Dia de Galgo, the official end of the Spanish season, and they try to organize all the protests in Spain and outside of Spain around that weekend.
What were some of the impact that you saw as a result of the march last year? And this is a peaceful protest, right?
Correct. I think that we are starting to see, people start to recognize the breed, and it's really hard to know if it's because of us, to be honest, or because of the conversation in general. More and more people are talking about the breeds, whether it's mainly on social networks, I believe, and a bit in the mainstream news. But people definitely start to recognize the breeds. And I'm getting asked sometimes if this is a galgo. Often people just think tapas is a greyhound. But Gemma, I'm sure that you see it with Podencos, which is a very unusual breed to the UK. Galgos can be mistaken for greyhounds, but the Podenco is a Podenco.
Yeah. Yeah, and when we first adopted them, people had no idea what they were. We had two for quite a long while, and we had all sorts. So they Dobermans. They don't look anything like a Doberman. Are they Lurchers? Are they Greyhounds? And now, there's quite a few people that say, "Oh, were they Podencos? I've seen those. I've heard about those," which is amazing. And we absolutely have contributed, I think, with Free Spanish Hounds to that conversation. I think more than that, one of the lovely things about the marches is the kind of connections and the networks that people build. I know of a small group of Podenco owners that met at the first London March in 2024 and still meet up regularly, and we see photos on their social media, and there are new people kind of joining that community all of the time, people that are interested in the dogs but have never had a chance to meet them in real life. They can come along, they can spend the day with them, consider adopting. It's not even all about adopting and fostering. There are many other ways to support the cause. Just showing up and lending your voice, sharing, liking on social media, they all make such a massive difference. So and I think we've got big ambitions. We want to kind of continue to grow each year. And last year we went from one the year before to 3 marches last year. We're adding a 4th location this year. I say this year, so we've done the 2025 marches. So there were 3 this year, there'll be 4 next year. So we're adding Exeter because we know there's a lot of Galgo and Podenco owners down in the southwest, and it's a long way for them to come up to London, which is their nearest march. So
Saying that, we did have people traveling from afar to come to participate in the first one. Yeah, especially the first one in London.
So you've got London and the new one is Exeter, and then where are the others, and do they happen on the same days?
Manchester and Glasgow are the others. So last year, Manchester, Glasgow and London did all happen on the same day. We found the last 2 years in London where we've chosen Saturdays to march, there are other large protests that take place on those Saturdays too. We don't know in advance what's going to happen and who might be marching, but often they can be, thousands and thousands and thousands of people that are marching, and it's been quite stressful the last 2 years in the run up. Adva, you're the kind of contact really with the Met, aren't you? And they do a brilliant job of liaising with us. But this year, I keep saying this year, 2026.
This year we had especially big challenge with the protest in London, where there was a protest and a counter protest. The Met were aware, obviously, of our presence and advised us that it's fine. We're not going to meet anyone. We start fairly early. Our route was walking away from the protest, but it does affect. We feel that it did affect attendance. I understand people were just concerned about traveling into London, especially with a dog, when this was going on, and just to prevent this and the stress. And we do want to make sure that people are safe and feel comfortable being here in London, marching with us. So we decided that next year we're going to spread our marches over the weekend. So we'll have Manchester, Glasgow and Exeter on the Saturday and London on the Sunday.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Which is great for us because we get to go to 2. I haven't figured out which other one I'm going to go to yet, but I can't wait because once a year is not enough. They're so special, and being able to go to 2 will be brilliant. And I'm hopeful that there might be a couple of other people that, decide that they'll do one day and one the next as well. They get the bug like we have.
Yeah, exactly. Rally the troops. You mentioned Adva counter protest. Is that counter to your protest?
Oh no, it had nothing to do with us. It was just it was the far right protesting in London, and they had the obviously counter protest. It was just very big and very loud, and we were concerned. Yeah, it wasn't. Yeah, it's just, again, we have the dogs with us, and we try when we plan. Especially when we planned the first march, I remember how nervous we were, and we actually walked the route twice just to make sure that it's safe. Both people and dogs would be able to walk okay. You know, we didn't want to create any situations where, especially the dogs, we didn't want them to panic. We didn't want them to stress. So we are very mindful when we plan these marches of everybody's safety. And yeah, and we just, the last 2 years, you know, when we meet, whether we have not really walked into a different protest on Saturday. It's just that we were aware of the presence. We always receive really good support and guidance from the Met Police in London. They're doing an amazing job, you know, considering how crazy it gets out there on a Saturday, because everybody's out there, you know, with voicing their opinions, which is absolutely fine, but you need to manage it. We hope that Sunday would be safer and a more relaxed experience, and that will also allow more people to attend.
I hope so. How many people attended the first year and then this year?
First year in London, we had about 200 people, 150 dogs. This year in London, it's all estimated. I believe that we had around 250 people and 200 dogs. We had, I believe that the registrations were almost double than that. But again, we do believe that many people decided to cancel and not arrive because of what was happening in London that day. And then in Manchester, we had, I think, around 80 to 100 people, and the same number in Glasgow. So all in all, we estimate around 400 people and about 350 dogs that marched in the UK this year.
That's a lot of people and a lot of dogs. I know that there are bigger marches, but if you put everyone together in a room, that would be very noisy. So yeah, that's an incredible achievement. Well done. My first thought was, because obviously I've got Duna and she's a Galga, I don't think there's any way I could take her to this march in February, as much as I would love to, because she is so anxious. What have been some of your experiences with Galgos? Because they all come from a similar place and they probably have similar issues. So
yeah, we definitely kind of encourage people to really think about their particular dog. In my role as trustee, I'm adopting dogs out, and we're kind of doing that. You know, we bring dogs over every single month, and people hear about the marches and say to us, oh, well, maybe I'll bring my dog. And actually, if it's kind of within the first 3 months or so, we're just like, don't even bother. They'll still be decompressing. For some of them, it'll take way longer than that. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, they may never, ever be suitable to come along. And there are many people that join us that leave their dogs at home and, you know, represent them without the dogs being there. That said, I think once you really know your dog, once you really kind of understand them, they just do incredibly. My third Podenco that I adopted has been my most nervous, Willow. I mean, just incredibly nervous when I first had her. I've had her about 3 years now, and she's blossomed so much in that time. The first year, I wouldn't have dreamt of taking her into London. And last year, I did a bit of a test run at the Sighthound Sundays walks that happen every month in various locations across London. And she did brilliantly. And I thought, you know what? She's ready. We've got that bond. I know that she'll be okay if she's with me. And she did absolutely brilliantly. Yeah, our advice would always be don't do it if you're not sure. You know, do a trial run if you can. For a lot of people that have to get public transport in, it's not just the march itself, it's the transport. I actually drive in, which makes it a little bit easier for the dogs. My dogs aren't really used to public transport. I live out in the countryside in Hertfordshire, so you know, that's not kind of the norm for them. But in the main, I mean, we're just blown away every year, aren't we, Adva, by how incredible the dogs are, given it's such a big group. There's quite a lot of waiting around. There's, you know, it's noisy. There's hustle and bustle. There's traffic. There's crossings, police horses, like you name it, they come across it. And it's like they know. They're just unbelievable. Yeah,
they
just
show up.
incredible. Yeah, they really do.
So cool. So the Spanish hunting season has started now, and it runs all the way through to February, which is usually when they discard and dispose of dogs by a variety of different ways. I'd love for you to touch on that, what some of those ways are, because I want you to assume that whoever's listening don't know anything and they haven't seen your Galgo, which is just a horrifying film. So it's a very difficult subject, I know. But if you could just kind of touch on those things, and then also the importance of preparation for you between now and then, kind of what are some of the key milestones that you work towards to get to that point in terms of the marches themselves?
Do you want to start, Gemma? Because you go to Spain, you've been to the show.
I was just thinking, I'm not sure if I can. I'll probably cry.
I can talk about Tapas. It's one of the lucky ones. Tapas was just abandoned. So Tapas and 2 or 3 other dogs showed up in the middle of a village, scared, confused, hungry. And he was terrified because I've seen videos of his rescue. The lucky ones just get abandoned. They often get hit by cars because they run across the roads. And now when a Galgo runs, he runs or trots for days. A Galgo is not a greyhound. They're bred for stamina. And I think that's one of the main key differences between Galgos and a greyhound. It just goes on and on and on and on for days. So they get hit by cars. No one stops. Usually they can die by the side of the road and no one cares. Or they just starve to death. Often they get sick. I mean, they could have been sick before they've been discarded, and then they just die of horrible diseases, Mediterranean diseases. Again, most people don't care. Or they get tortured, beaten. You see dogs being brought to the shelters with broken backs, broken legs, broken jaws. They get hung. That's the piano playing. So they hang them by a wire. And so their feet can barely touch the ground until they get tired and they die. And it's just incredible how creative the galgueros, the hunters, can be when they decide that it's time to kill their dogs, basically. So it's a horrible, cruel culture of apparently revenge because the dog wasn't good enough to hunt.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'd say is it's not even just the ones that aren't good enough. The ones that are good enough are often starved. They're kept in kennels with no daylight, with concrete floors on chains. One of mine, who was actually on Fuerteventura and found in a kill shelter there, his teeth are worn down, where I think he's been chewing on a chain just to try and get away. It's just a miserable existence for most of them, just purely because of the breed that they are, what they're used for, the fact that the legislation doesn't cover their welfare in any way, shape or form, and people know that they can get away with it. I think one of the cruelest things I've seen, it was Galgos del Sol, I think, that found these particular Podencos. They'd been abandoned in, I don't know if it was almost like an empty kind of water tank, so really kind of high concrete sides. They'd got contraptions in their mouth that meant that they couldn't bark, they couldn't eat, they couldn't drink, they were just left there. Thankfully, they were found, but if they hadn't, it would have been such a slow, painful death for them. Like Adva says, the lengths that they go to kind of increase the suffering. If you're going to do it quickly, but that's just not what happens, not part of the culture. And it's awful.
Which part of Spain does this typically happen in?
Most of Spain. There's, a lot of the rural areas have got a hunting culture. The islands, the Canary Islands, are equally bad. Ibiza, pretty widespread. A lot of the shelters that we work with are kind of across southern Spain, but, there are, right up around Barcelona, Madrid, all over really. It really is widespread. You'll find different regional varieties of dogs, and hunters will kind of have their preference. There are some shelters we work with that are kind of right in the heartland of Andalusia, and they have the small little Andalusian Podencos. There are some areas where Galgos are the preference, where bigger Podencos are the preference. You tend to find that there are varieties, but it is just so entrenched in the culture. I think the one positive thing I would say during many of my trips to Spain, you go to the cities, much more cosmopolitan, and you do see adopted Galgos and Podencos in the cities. And there are people, and there's many people in Spain, we can't tar everybody with the same brush, that are as passionate, if not more, than us about this. They're the ones that are doing the work on the ground. A lot of them are Spanish locals and are disgraced by what their country allows to happen. But yeah, I would say it's pretty widespread, unfortunately.
What do you think happens in the brain, in the mind, to be able to, do you think it's like a compartmentalization? How is it possible for human beings with hearts, with minds, to be capable of these things and for it to continue in 2025?
Gosh, if we knew that. You could say that about so many things. They just see them as tools. That's really kind of it.
Yeah, they're not sentient beings as far as they're concerned. They're just there for a purpose. It's almost like a very old-fashioned, way. I mean, don't forget that until very recently, it was widely believed that animals don't have feelings. They're still there.
Right. Okay. So it's old thinking being passed down through generations, similar to what's in that movie, actually. I don't know if you remember, there was a little boy in the documentary that was in the slaughterhouse showing the process of how the cows and pigs would be killed. And like, this is step one and this is step two. And he was so like, it was so normal and it was so everyday.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like this kind of continues because it starts young. It's really hard to kind of change that. Do you know if they have people going into schools in Spain? Do they?
Yes, so there are efforts to educate. For example, greyhounds in need support. Galgos de Sol run, they call it mobile schools, where they try and go in, and meet the children and teach them about galgos and try and change that mindset. Greyhounds in need finances, I believe, Galgos de Sol education program. So in 2024, when we had the first march, the international team from NAC actually came and joined us in London. So they opened the first protest, and they did tell us that they think that things are changing slowly, very slowly, gradually. And they said it's just the awareness and the education. And I remember they told me that the children now ask their grandfathers, "Oh, where do you keep the hunting dogs? Where are your dogs?" Because they often, like Gemma said, kept chained to a wall or in a damp basement, or just in some sort of outdoor structure with no light, hardly any water, often no food, concrete floors. So apparently they do go and ask, where do you keep them? Can you show us, where are your dogs? And they did say that there were cases of people just handing in the dogs to the shelter, saying, look, we just can't deal with the questions because our grandchildren keep asking us, what about the dog? What about the dog?
Good.
So I don't know how, that was an example. Now, again, I don't know how common it is and how often it happens. And I believe that it's not as widespread as it was presented to me, but it's happening. And if you can change the mindset of the next generation, like Tina, who is the founder of Galgos de Sol, saying she's trying to get herself out of work by educating the children. So if there's more effort put into it, obviously it's not sponsored by the government. So this is not something that happens. These are not state schools. This is not part of the learning program in Spain, but this is an effort that's done by associations and charities and animal rights groups.
Yeah, but if schools allow external parties in to educate the children, then surely that speaks volumes about their own kind of belief systems and values as well, right?
Yeah, I want to believe so, yes.
Yeah, that's a positive sign. That's a really positive sign because they could be part of the problem and be like, no,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
absolutely not. But yeah, so my understanding was, I remember when I met with Adva a couple of weeks ago, we were chatting and she was telling me how, I think it was 2023, Europe's most advanced welfare laws decided to exclude Podencos and Galgos from being classified as pets. And then what I'm curious about is what happened between then and now, because I think it was yesterday or the day before I saw an announcement made. The remit has moved to agriculture.
Yeah.
What do you know about that scenario? Like, what was the news, if you can share?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, probably worth going back to 2023 because all through the development of this animal welfare law, the dogs were included, and it was a really last minute addition to exclude them. Lots of lobbying from hunting communities. My understanding is a lot of the kind of government officials are also involved in some of those circles. And yeah, at a relatively late stage in proceedings, the amendment got put in that excluded these dogs. So that was a huge blow and not really any time to counter that because the assumption was all animals were kind of covered. And yeah, more recently, PACMA, who are another movement in Spain, similar to NAC, campaigning for animal rights, and I think they're actually a political party. They have shared some news around the fact that the legislative body that looks after this area and looks after the welfare. Well, I say the welfare, they're not included in the laws, but, oversees this kind of area and this community is changing, and they're moving to another area, which essentially, kind of reading between the lines, it is further kind of diminishing any hope of them becoming covered by that law. They're just being pushed further and further out, almost further down the priority list, and it's just another blow, really. And there was another quote, again, really difficult. We haven't got kind of notes of the actual meeting. These are kind of represented on PACMA's website around what happened, but another quote just around the fact that essentially they are tools, they're kind of not sentient beings, and it doesn't really matter. It is really kind of the summary of it. I don't know whether you've got anything to add.
I wish I could send them a video of Duna. Like, she is just the most gentle, precious little thing. And this is not like me projecting my human, cuteness and humanizing her. She just is such a gentle, gentle soul. And I can see that she has feelings.
Absolutely. It's quite topical. My soul dog that sat behind me on the sofa, this time of night, she's normally sat on my lap or sat next to me, and she's looking at me and she's making this whining noise like, "Mum, what are you doing? Why aren't you sat next to me?"
That's so funny. They do that. You're like, where
Yeah.
are my pets? I'm
Yeah.
missing my pets. Come on, human.
But yeah, they are just incredible.
Yeah.
And yeah, we've got quite a few of our adopted Podencos that have become kind of qualified therapy dogs as well. Like, they're just really, they're clever dogs. They're very emotionally in tune and intelligent. Not all of them, but I would say in general as a breed, they are particularly kind of tuned in to people's feelings, and they are super sensitive. How you could kind of look upon them and not see that is unfathomable for me, really. But yeah. Sadly, that is where we're at.
Same. So just out of curiosity, there are a lot of people who believe that we shouldn't have foreign dogs, amongst other things, coming into the UK. What do you have to say about that?
We don't get it that often, actually, but it does crop up every now and again. And I think we just, if people are going to have those views, it's unlikely you're necessarily going to change their mind. But I think the things that we would say are they aren't covered by animal welfare laws. In comparison, we've got good animal welfare laws in the UK. Yes, there are dogs that need homes in the UK. Yes, the situation is not ideal, but the mass suffering that takes place in Spain and actually many other European countries as a result of the legislation or the custom and practice is that there's just no comparison between where we're at in the UK and what that looks like in Spain. And I think the other thing that we often find is that some of the bigger charities, dog rehoming charities in the UK, have very blanket policies, which are completely understandable when they're kind of getting the volumes through. They can afford to do that. But actually, it does mean that dog lovers don't necessarily have the ability to adopt a dog if that's what they really want to do. And in many instances do end up going and buying a puppy. Smaller charities that really can't overlook any good home for a blanket reason are more flexible. There are certain things for us that are a bit more of a deal breaker, keeping them safe and secure, making sure your fence height in your garden. If you have a garden, you don't need a garden. Both of you live in flats. We send many Podencos to flats. Galgos do great in flats. Some Galgos and some Podencos. That's probably worth saying. Not all of them would be suitable. But we just assess everyone on a case-by-case basis. And it just means that it kind of opens up that opportunity to more people. So I think there's kind of two sides of it, really. Like I say, that the situation isn't really comparable in the UK as it is to Spain and some other European countries. And then just that ability to kind of bring an adoptive dog into people's homes who wouldn't necessarily be a candidate for some of the kind of more well-known dog rehoming charities in the UK.
How do they normally come over?
So they're driven over in purpose-built, kind of air-conditioned in the summer, heated in the winter. They are all subject to DEFRA and HMRC guidance and checks. We effectively import them and do all the paperwork. They have to have all the relevant testing, vaccines, etc. It's all done by the book. There's a certain number that are allowed on any one vehicle at any one time. That's the way it's done. We do more extensive blood testing in Spain as well, just to make sure we're really setting up adopters for success, and making sure we're really clear with them on their health status and what to expect. So it is a long journey for them, but actually compared to the opportunity they've got for the rest of their lives lives living on a comfy sofa rather than in a kennel, they get over it pretty quickly. So yeah, it's worth it for sure.
They travel very well, so I wouldn't be too concerned about the journey for them.
What do you think UK charities or rescues can learn from rescues that work predominantly with dogs from other countries?
I think some of the bigger charities, although they may have blanket policies, actually places like Battersea are really kind of open-minded. We've worked with them a couple of times. If they've had a Podenco in, they'll reach out to us for specialist advice. And they also run lots of training events for people that work in small overseas dog shelters. I think there's a couple of others. I don't want to misquote anything, but I think some of the other bigger UK charities do kind of have an arm that is really looking at what's going on further afield and supporting those rescues. So I think that's great. They've got more funding, more resources, and can really make a difference there. I think that really approaching every dog in a unique way, considering an adoption form where we're kind of adopting, 10 dogs every month. I say we're able to do that. I mean, sometimes it's a real stretch. There's only a few of us, and we are doing it on top of full-time jobs, but we are able to really go through that matching process carefully, consider the individual's needs. We've had some people that have come to us with quite unique circumstances, and it's taken us 6 months to a year to find a dog that's the right match. But if they're a good adopter, we will do whatever we can to find a dog that's the right match for that person. It doesn't make sense for some of those bigger charities to necessarily take that approach, which I understand. They've got hundreds of dogs coming in and out of their doors on a daily, weekly basis. But yeah, I think just, sharing is great. Connections, best practice. I think that's just what I would kind of continue to encourage. They're all dogs, regardless of where they've come from. They share some of the same kind of behavioural challenges in homes, and adopters, face some of the same difficulties as well. So that's probably the biggest thing for me. Adoption processes are pretty extensive, regardless of which charity or rescue that you work with. We provide a huge amount of post-adoption support in particular. It is challenging adopting a dog, without a doubt. It's not a bed of roses. Particularly a dog you've never met before, you don't always have that instant connection. There are real frustrating times. Every single time I've adopted another dog, I've had moments where I've thought, what on earth have I done? And I've got the other trustees to call up and be like, I'm having a moment. Why did I do this? I've just completely upset the equilibrium in my house. Things have gone to pot. What did I do? And that's what we want to be for our adopters. We want to be there at the end of the phone. So we have a trainer that works on our team. She does check-ins at certain points up post-adoption where she'll reach out. Some adopters are naturally more forthcoming. Others, you don't really hear from them and you just wonder, are you just going to get a call one day where they say, this hasn't worked? We really want to try and avoid that. For us, it's not just about getting the dogs into homes. It's about making sure every single dog and every single other person, animal in that home is also thriving. That's really what we strive for, to give these dogs the best chance possible. And we just say, reach out to us at any point in time. We'll always come back to you. If it's urgent, I'll duck out of a work call and try and jump on a call to sort something out. Like it's super important that people feel like they've got that level of support. So yeah, that's definitely, I think, what we certainly strive to offer. That again, I don't know that all rescues necessarily can, but it's a really important part for us because we don't have kennel premises in the UK. If somebody calls us and says, I can't look after this dog anymore, it's difficult to find somewhere else for that dog to go. And it's unsettling for the dog as well. So yeah, really trying to make a success of it is important, and just making sure people feel that they're equipped with the knowledge to make the right decision for them at the beginning. We don't shy away from how difficult it can be, some of the challenges that people might face. They've got to be in it. They've got to kind of make that commitment and ride out the lows to get to the point where the balance is restored.
Yeah.
And it is so worth it. If you can get through it, it is so worth it. But yeah.
If you could speak to every Galgo, every Podenco guardian in the UK, what would you say to them?
You don't have to have a Podenco or a Galgo. You can have a sight hound, you can have a dog, or you can just be an animal lover that really cares and want to join us and raise awareness about the abuse that these dogs are going through in Spain. So that's number one. Number two, we love people to join us in the actual marches, but we also need help with other things. We have a network of volunteers and supporters that offer the skills. Most of them actually do require to be at the march, physically, but things like photographers. So we do have professional photographers who donate the time and skills and show up and help us produce really nice images, amazing images of the marches. We're looking for help with, we need stewards, so people who can help us physically manage the march. It's especially important in London. So, it's big. We're walking through central London with lots of people and lots of dogs, and our march gets broken down into little groups. There's nothing we can do about it. We have to walk in groups. So we need help just to make sure that it flows well, that everyone's safe again, that the traffic is managed, people wait to cross the road. So that's very important. Stewards. What else did I forget, Gem?
Donations. They're really important. All of the time is voluntary, but there are costs associated. So high-vis vests, banners, placards, megaphones, the cost of hosting the website. So if people can't come along, if they could donate the cost of, a train fare, a coffee, £1, it all helps. And just spread the word. I think that's key. Socials are really important. Every single year we get people say, my gosh, you did a march. I didn't know about it. I would have come if I'd known. And we do our utmost to try and get it out there to as many people as possible. So if you see us on socials, if you can give us a like, a comment, a share, a repost, it really does kind of amplify our voice. The algorithms sometimes work against us, but we can combat that with our army of supporters. So yeah, get involved. You don't have to physically be there. I know it's too far for some people or difficult, but yeah, loads of ways to show your support, and it makes such a big difference to the dogs.
Okay, so join us on 31st of January in Manchester, in Glasgow, or in Exeter. You don't have to have a Podenco. You don't have to have a Galgo. You really just need to like and care for animals. We are going to have the information on the website. We're also going to enable registrations to the marches via the website.
And on Sunday, the 1st of February in London, peaceful protest. You can bring your dogs, whether they're Podencos or Galgos or not. We'd love for you to join us and really represent them. We are their voice.
And just lastly, please follow us on Instagram and on Facebook, Free Spanish Hounds. And you can also visit our website. It's freespanishhounds.co.uk.
Thank you so much. I'm very grateful for your time, and I can't wait to get this message out because it's important and it matters.